Do I have people in there? Okay. Hello, good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, depending on where you are in the world. This is Hedgie, and I am here today to show you how to make two different recipes. One of them is a seasonal drink that you can bring to family gatherings, your own parties at home, to your church, whatever you want to do. And that is a spiced pumpkin cider. The second recipe is for beef chow yuck. Hello, husband. And I believe we have Jack in here as well. Hello, Jack. How are you doing today? Um, Beef chow yuck is one of those recipes when I was a child. We went out to Chinese restaurants, and my father's always been a big beef eater, and it's not horrendously common to have beef in what they offered on the menus. Our typical dinner was almond fried chicken, chicken chow mein, uh, pork fried rice, and beef chow yuck. And beef chow yuck is basically a large cut vegetable dish with beef in it. And it could probably have been called beef chow mein, but this is old style. This is not the way that they cook it today, where if you get chow mein, it's, at least half noodles. Um, Chow mein back in the day when I was a kid, it was very Americanized, but it was primarily a vegetable dish that was served over either crunchy or soft noodles. The soft noodles that you get today in any kind of chow mein, or the hard crunchy noodles that you put on the bottom. And they weren't as bad for you as the ones they have today, because they didn't have all the carbs in them. They were actually, as long as you didn't go overboard on the soy sauce, they were made with a light gravy and lots of vegetables and lean cuts of meat. So it really wasn't that bad. Of course, now today it's all changed. So the first thing I'm going to show you how to do is make the pumpkin cider, because that's going to take a little while for the pumpkin to cook. And this isn't going to be like a cup of pumpkin pie. This is going to be a large portion of apple cider is the first ingredient. And the full-on batch of it calls for a gallon. I'm only doing a half because my husband, who's British, doesn't really care that much for pumpkin. He doesn't understand the American obsession with it, as he calls it. So you can use apple juice if you can't find apple cider, but there's a better apple flavor in the apple cider because it's made with mashed up apples rather than a juicing process. So you have more particulates in it. And the next thing it has in it is 3/4 of a cup of pumpkin puree. And this is a half recipe, so I am not going to be adding that much. I'm going to add about a half a cup. And you can use this for a second batch in another day or so, or you can just flat add it in with a pie, or I have another recipe I'll eventually be showing you all, which is pumpkin pie oatmeal that you cook in a crock pot overnight. And you have this lovely pumpkin recipe in the morning. So what you do now is just whisk the pumpkin and the apple cider together. Yes, in my Discord, I have put up all of the stream recipes as I have actually showed them to you, and you can go get them long after the recipes are gone from the stream, the VOD. So the next thing you need to put in here is ginger, and it's best to use a piece of ginger about half the size of your thumb and peel it and just throw it in whole. However, I couldn't find any that was any good. So we're going to use some ground ginger, and this is going to put in about half a teaspoon. It would be a full teaspoon if it was the full recipe. And then you use cloves. And again, I don't really mind the difference between whole cloves and ground cloves. They're both the same to me. Cloves are very strong. So that's about a quarter teaspoon. These are, by the way, all of the spices that you would find in pumpkin pie spice, save for allspice. And then we put cinnamon in there. And the cinnamon is going to be a full teaspoon. Now at this point you stir it again, or whisk it in this case. And although the spices float on the surface when the cider is raw, and so are the spices, they will sink and incorporate as it cooks. So that is the spiced pumpkin cider. And that's all you do to it. Quite frankly, the cider or apple juice, whichever you choose to use, is sweet enough. You don't need to add any sugar to it, but this is obviously to taste. So if you want to add more sugar to it, go right ahead. And I am putting that heavy piece of crockery into my crock pot bottom and putting a lid on it. And I am now going to put it on high. And I'm going to put it on high for an hour. And that should be long enough for it to come to a simmer. And it will cook the pumpkin. If you don't cook the pumpkin, it's just going to taste like raw squash. So anyway, and the advantage of making this in a crock pot instead of on the stove is that it slowly brings it to temperature. And it will maintain the temperature. It'll has a keep warm function. And then you can have this sitting there for hours, making your house smell like pumpkin pie. And it's always the perfect drinking temperature. So you can make this before a party or a gathering and do it hours ahead of time, and it really doesn't matter. Pardon me while I drink. And no, that's water. It's not it's not vodka, unfortunately. So the next thing we're moving on to is the beef chow yak. And the first thing you need to do is you need to take some nice, decent cuts of beef. They don't have to be steak. You can make it with stew meat. You can make it with chuck steak, as I am here, because chuck steak has a really wonderful flavor. And it's just a nice piece of meat that will cook up tender and takes the flavor well. One of the first things you have to do is cut up the meat, and then you need to actually marinate the meat, or what they call velvet it. You combine it with sesame oil, some soy sauce, and a vegetable oil, and cornstarch. And the cornstarch actually works to tenderize the meat. So whether you're doing this with beef for beef chow yuck, or if you're doing it with chicken for chicken chow mein, either way you're going to be marinating it for a little while, and it'll just cook up lovely. So, and it'll have this slight, it's not like it is not like a crust exactly. It's just a little bit of an added texture. And you want to cook this, you want to cut this to be thin slices. And it's your choice whether you make them really small or if you leave them in a long strip like you would for a stir fry. In effect, this is a stir fry. So if you've never done this before, you'll know exactly what that is. You'll know how to do it. Stir frying is honestly one of the easiest cooking methods. It's just throw everything in a wok and fry it while you're stirring. So I have an electric wok that you'll be seeing me use here. This isn't my kitchen. This is actually my living room. We don't have a kitchen bigger than a minute, and I can tell you that this 2x4 table we've got in here, 2 foot by 4 foot table, pretty much fills the entire living room. So this is not a large flat. Now, the best thing about cooking some of the Asian foods is that they are as healthy as you want them to be. You can serve this with rice if you want to add some more carbs into it to make it a more balanced meal. If you want to do keto friendly, leave them out. These are just fine by themselves. You can eat them just as vegetables and meat and really won't miss it much. You can add just a little bit of carbs. Yeah, I've kind of given up, and I talk like my husband now. After 12 years of marriage, I do say flat, and a spattering of other English words. However, I gave up also in my spelling, so I use UK spelling on a lot of words. Most of the people I was talking to for the year or so that my husband and I were going out were from the UK. And I was the only one that spelled color without a U. And after a little while of them snickering at me, I just gave up. It was fine. Our American English is, after all, just a dialect of English. So, no real problem, and it kept people from snickering, and, you know, they were already snickering at me about pumpkin and calling myself Hedgepig. So I had enough to deal with at this time, on top of dealing with Andrew. What she means is she spells properly. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, fortunately, the food that I cook is compatible with Andrew's sensibilities for the most part. He's even tried my tofu a time or two. Not crazy about it, but he has tried it with an open mind, which I thank him for. Now, most of the restaurants that I used to eat at when I was a kid they've just kind of disappeared. One of them, there was a huge scandal in the Seattle area when the Chinese gangs decided it would be a good thing to go into one of the restaurant chains and, basically kill everybody in it. It wasn't very friendly, but that did away with one of our favorite restaurants. And another one, I think they got taxed out, basically, of the area that they were using as their business. They were in a prime area of downtown Bellevue, which is it's not as big as Seattle, but it's up there. So I am taking and I am measuring the oil into a container that I am going to cook. I'm going to marinate the meat in before it gets cooked. And oh, I thought that was a cat down there. That would have been upsetting. So as I said, you take oil and some cornstarch, and I am reaching for the cornstarch. And put the cornstarch in the bottom, and I am going to I use a reduced sodium soy sauce. It has a lighter flavor to it in addition to just flat being lower in sodium, which when you're talking about soy sauce can be considerable. My mother has to really watch her sodium, so the more things I can cut down on, the better. And there, we've got that done. And now I take and just sort of stir this up to combine the cornstarch with the oils and the soy sauce, and it looks at first like it's not going to do it. Sorry, I didn't see, you couldn't see. It looks at first like it's not going to combine, but it always does. Just takes it a minute or two, and that'll make it so that the cornstarch goes evenly over all. And if you're wondering about my bracelet, yes, it is a disabled person bracelet. I am disabled. When I was 19, I fell down a flight of stairs and broke my leg badly enough. They were afraid they were going to have to amputate it, but they didn't, for which I thank them. And the doctor told me I would be in a wheelchair by the time I was 40, and I'm 53 and still not in a wheelchair, so although limping on my leg for 30 years plus didn't do any favors, and it blew out my other knee, so that has forced me into a disability retirement. And I cook now from a chair, so that's fine. You adapt. It's just, I'd say I didn't miss walking, but I do. It's kind of strange some days to, look across the room and realize I need to go get up to turn on or off a light and think to myself, that's going to take a little bit. So, but I adapt. I'm still not in a wheelchair, so every day out of it is a good one. Hasn't really stopped me from doing the things I wanted to do in life. Probably would have been easier on me if I had taken it easier, but I was a bit stubborn and they told me to take it easy. I'd never run again, and I basically just decided at that point I was going to do all of the things I wanted to do before I couldn't anymore. So I actually had a pretty good life that way. Got involved with showing large dogs, Great Dane large, and I got into performance horses, riding and training and getting to know those wonderful creatures. And I don't regret that part a bit. I'm just taking out the extraneous fat that I would normally leave in if we were going to be broiling these steaks. Just cutting back a little bit on the fat load that's in the meat. As you can see, the meat is actually quite nicely marbled, and that basically means it's got fat running through the muscle fiber in addition to having it around. Hey, Richard. and it makes for a more flavorful meat. Lean meats are wonderful, but they can be dry and they don't have as much flavor. That's why Wagyu beef is considered the best in the world, and that stuff is nearly half nearly half fat. How are you doing, Richard? This is really late for you, isn't it? I'm so happy you've come in to see me make beef chow yuck and spiced pumpkin cider. I've already put this pumpkin cider in. It is a gallon of, I'm making a half recipe. It's a half a gallon of apple cider, about a half a cup of pumpkin puree, and it has got about a half teaspoon of ginger, a quarter teaspoon of ground cloves, and a teaspoon of cinnamon, and then you put it in a crock pot on high for an hour to cook the pumpkin. And it just sits there and makes your house smell wonderful. Only 120? Well, that's not too terrible. How was the cafe today? Busy? And what I'm doing here is I'm making beef chow yuck, and it's basically a mainly vegetable, kind of like chicken chow mein except with beef, and it's got larger vegetables in it. Now I have taken and cut up the meat, and I am now getting rid of that cutting board, because you do not want to cross-contaminate, and once you have used some form of raw meat on a board, you've got to change it. I'm washing my hands now with an antibacterial soap, antibacterial goo, and so that I don't cross-contaminate anything else with my hands or the knife. So I'm getting a new knife, and we will start cutting the vegetables. So, all right. Now, the meat that I have sliced up was chuck steak, and I'm sorry. Yeah, I need to get a microphone. I know that. What I need to do here is now I have got a marinade for the meat. It is canola oil and sesame oil with some low sodium soy sauce and also some cornstarch. And the cornstarch will create what they term velvet on the meat. Not exactly a crust, but it does add a sort of velvety texture to it. And it tenderizes the meat, which I did not know until recently. So that's a new one on me. I did not know that cornstarch will tenderize a meat if you marinate it with it. So this is going to sit here and tenderize and gain a little bit of flavor from the soy sauce and sesame oil. And don't go overboard on sesame oil, whatever you do. It's a very strong flavor, and it can very easily take over a dish, and that's not really what you're doing. We're not making sesame beef here. So now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to get a little drink here and hydrate. Anyone who does not know Richard, he is the co-owner of Roasted Cafe in I'm going to slaughter this, I apologize, Cheltenham, England. And he is the only restaurant in Gloucestershire that has rotisserie chickens, and they specialize in them. They're absolutely, oh, they look so wonderful. And he and his nephew Connor are they share the cafe. Connor is the primary chef, and he has the only deaf guy. And he's also one of my mods, but at the moment, no. So, I am now going to start processing all the veg. And this has a lot of veg. So, okay. I have got a very large bowl. There I am. Hi. Which the veg will be going into. And quite a bit of it is canned. I could use fresh bean sprouts, but it's just easier not to. And not all grocery stores carry them unless you're going to an Asian market, because there just isn't that much of a call for it unless you're cooking, say it with me, Asian food. So I've got 2 cans, which is approximately 2 cups of bean sprouts, and they can also be found as mung bean sprouts. I have got bamboo shoots, which are sliced up bits of bamboo and very tasty. Some of the many goodies you can find. So I've got 2 cans of that in there. I have got 2 cans of sliced water chestnuts, which don't really taste like anything until you put sauces on them. And then they're just these lovely crunchy things that you find in your food. And you can also put them in other recipes. You can dice them up and put them in tuna salad to add an interesting little crunch. I'm pretty sure that their main function is to add texture, which they do beautifully. I have also got cut baby corns. And if you get them so that they're not cut them down to about an inch size piece. You want to have everything be bite size. And I've got 2 15-ounce cans of that. So as of this point, I have halfway filled my giant bowl with canned veg. Now at this point, we start getting interesting. This is bok choy. It is basically a Chinese form of a very mild cabbage. It has a slightly sweet flavor to it, I find. And oops. Honey, these need to be rinsed. They got dirt in them. There you go. And I have got half an onion around here somewhere. There it is. And once again, I'm using a sweet onion. Hi Nagatron, how you doing? Welcome in. It's great to see you. The meal is coming along. I have, to recap, I have put on, did you? I hope not. I still see you. To recap, I have put in the spiced pumpkin cider. Hi Frumpy, which is at this point half a gallon of apple cider, a half a cup of pumpkin puree, a half teaspoon of ground ginger because I couldn't find any good non-ground ginger, and I could not find any good cinnamon I was out of, so I used ground cinnamon. That has a teaspoon of it, and I also have a quarter teaspoon of ground cloves because boy, that's a strong spice, and my father doesn't care much for it. I'm making a half a recipe of the cider because my husband really doesn't care for pumpkin, and I don't want to have to drink it all by myself. And this is a recipe that doesn't require any extra sugar, so it's not that bad for you either. And then that's whisked up and put in a crock pot on high for an hour, and that's going to be simmering away while I make the beef chow yuck. And so far I have opened cans of 2 cans of water chestnuts, 2 cans of bean sprouts, 2 cans of bamboo shoots, and 2 cans of these lovely little things. That would be the baby corn. And yes, I am munching one. I'm now slicing the onion to go in it. I am missing two items from the recipe here that is in my stream recipes section of the Discord. I could not find shiitake mushrooms. The fresh mushrooms here have been kind of bad lately. And the store was out of snow peas. So they didn't have any, so I just left them out since there's only so many stores you want to go to looking for this stuff. So I have cut the onions up into nice little sticks to go in this. I used canned pumpkin because I wasn't going to make any pies or anything. If I was going to make pies, I would have used the sugar pumpkins and taken some of the fresh pumpkin from that after processing it. And yeah, I know fresh is best, but in some cases it's just a bit problematic. So this is what I'm left with at this point. I have cut up 2 pounds of chuck steak, and it is in long strips, and it is marinating in some canola oil and some sesame oil in a little bit of reduced sodium soy sauce and cornstarch, which the cornstarch works to actually tenderize the meat. So here's what we've got here, and now I need to start adding in the bok choy, which is going to be a huge amount of food. So let me grab the bok choy. Got some broken looking little buggers here. I'll just choose not to use the badly damaged leaves. Bok choy is another, like most cabbages, it tends to be used in recipes as a filler. It's a very tasty filler. Cabbage is good for you in a number of ways. It's good for your digestion. It helps with roughage, of course, and it's got some lovely vitamins in it. And we don't really need to, it just makes everything taste lovely and fresh. And as I said, it has a slightly sweet taste, and it's very pleasant to eat even raw. Cooked, it kind of blends in with everything. That's a section I don't want to eat, so we'll cut that off. And you want to take and you want to slice the white portions, which, without having threads, have a very similar texture to celery. And you want to keep the leaf portion big because that cooks up like spinach, so it just shrinks away. Let's get rid of those. And this will be cooked in my electric wok, which I am still pleased with. That is my husband's favorite addition to our house, is that 45 cup coffee urn. Boy, they're really scarred up. It's not dirt, but it is scarred up. I'm not fond of that. We'll just take that one out. And then, as I said, as you go up the leaf, you just take bigger and bigger cuts. And the recipe calls for 6 cups of this, but I am actually making a reduced recipe. You'll also notice in the recipe that I list garlic in there. And as I've said, I never ever use garlic, but I will tell you where it's supposed to be in a recipe. Yes, it's an electric wok. It's kind of like an electric frying pan, but this thing gains temperature just amazingly fast, which is my favorite part of it. It goes just searingly hot very quickly, and that's really what you want in a wok. So I started out without a lot of high hopes for it, but it's been a real nice performer. I've cooked chicken chow mein and fried rice in it, and beef chow yuck, and a variety of different recipes that, you know, I made spaghetti in it once because I wanted to have the meat cook rapidly, and it's kind of fun to cook in. It was a new toy, so I did it. I'm not sorry. Yeah, no, it does worse than that, honey. It stops my breathing, so it is a major garlic allergy. It's not worth the risk. One of the things you will see in this is that I use oyster sauce, and I have checked many times, and while some brands do have garlic in it, the one that I use does not. And oyster sauce is, well, it's made of oysters, and it adds in that extra element that they call umami, and it's just sort of a salty, lovely, oceanic flavor with the oysters in there, but it doesn't really taste like oysters, so that's always helpful, especially if you don't like oysters. However, the dish really isn't the same if you leave it out. I guess if you really hated it or had an oyster allergy, you could just use soy sauce, but it wouldn't really be the same. And this will create a giant bowl of vegetation. Always cut the ends off just like you would with celery. And just cut gradually bigger because you are cooking everything all at the same time, and the stems will cook a lot faster, will cook a lot slower than the leaves. Okay. And this is kind of nibbled on. And this down here was nibbled on, so we'll get rid of those. And this was just 2 heads of regular bok choy. You can use baby bok choy if you like. It's more expensive, it's smaller, it's cuter, it's a little more tender, but I really don't notice that big of a difference except in the price. So I just use regular bok choy, and I'm happy to be able to find it. So that's the last of my bok choy. And the next thing we are cutting up is celery stalks. You've never even heard of an electric frying pan either. Yeah, the heat is very well distributed. You get what you pay for. If you pay for a really cheap one, not so much, and you'll probably have burn marks going through it. But if you pay for a better one, the heat is very well distributed. They even have them in ceramic coated, which I prefer because it's non-stick and it seems to be able to handle really hard use much better than, for instance, the regular non-stick. Okay. Now, the last portion is celery, and normally celery is kind of an off product. You would put a few stalks of celery here and there, but in both my chicken chow mein recipe and in my beef chow yuck, celery is fairly big in the ingredient lineup. So I am using, well, it's a pound of celery here. And you want to start by tidying the ends. They have a tendency, even when it's fresh, because they've already been processed, to be a little dry on the ends. So I always cut off at least a 1/4 inch. And I'll do these a few at a time because I'm not giving them a regular cut, I'm giving them a diagonal cut. So it's just a little nicer looking, a little bit more interesting when you eat it. And how is everybody's evening going? You think you're going to stick around for the whole thing this time, Nog? Or do you have a stream you have to go to later? Cornstarch is a sauce thickener, but it also works to tenderize meat. So it kind of has a double duty in this recipe. Marinate the meat in it, and you are also going to be adding it with broth to thicken the sauce that's put on it. And this has a sauce on it that they call a white gravy for Asian dishes, and that basically just means that it's broth that is thickened with cornstarch. It doesn't have, a lot of other ingredients in it, getting it to take on other lovely rich colors like you would have with the sauce for General Tso's or your kung pao chicken or beef or whatever. You wouldn't find any of those darker ingredients in it. It's a very light flavor too, so it's a nice light flavored dish. And as I told them, Nog, knowing that you're doing the keto diet again, this would probably be considered very keto friendly because it's just meat and vegetables. If you want to serve it with rice at the end, that's up to you. But it is basically a beef stir fry. And even the half dose I'm making this time makes a lot of food. I don't know what's wrong with me. No matter what I do, whatever size of bowl that I have is the size of bowl that will be filled. So it's a sickness, I tell you. I think this is why my husband won't let me have some of those really big stock pots I keep eyeing in Costco. Well, you can thicken it with cornstarch or some other, more keto-friendly things, but it doesn't really have a lot. Probably has a quarter cup, so 2 ounces for about 10 servings. We already have run out of space, honey. You know we have. Anytime I make soups or spaghetti or anything like that, and then I fill them all the way to the top. I'm going to take and shift this over. This is the last of the ingredients before I start stir frying. Starting to smell the pumpkin. Crock pot is starting to have a little simmer around the edges, so the spices are combining with the pumpkin and apple cider, and it's making a lovely fragrance. Could last for hours. Now Frumpy is the one that has tried this recipe, and she informs me that her son, who's 12, says it was freaking awesome. So that's nice. Anytime you can get a teenager to eat something with less sugar in it, awesome. Okay. I think we're going to have to get this knife sharpened before I use it again. It's a bit more effort to cut than it should have been. Okay, so now I have this giant bowl. Giant, see the size of the hands in here. It's a big bowl. I make potato salad in this thing. It's enormous. I'm going to drink. And I will now move this off to the side and brace it unwisely with my knee. I'll move the other block to the side. And this is my electric wok. It has a lovely controller here. It has a lot of adjustments here. It's even got a lock. This actually locks it in, so there's no chance it's going to come out if you accidentally tug too hard. And this is from Aroma, by the way. And fire, you're not going in. There you go. There we go. And I'm going to wash my hands again because they feel a little gritty. So, and this is moisturizing hand sanitizer, which pretty much makes everything I touch taste like alcohol, and not in a good way. Now, with an electric wok, or any wok, what you need to do first is put some oil in the container, and you need to have it come up to heat before you put anything into it, because the effect of the stir frying is cooking under high temperature and not dumping everything on the floor like I just did. Okay, so I add a couple tablespoons of oil to the bottom, and this doesn't look that big. This is a 7-quart frying pan. I did it again. Okay. And you want to turn the heat up fairly high, about 3/4 of the way. And the effect you're looking at to know when your oil is hot enough, it causes a ripple across the top of the oil. It's pretty interesting effect. It looks almost like a pond with a little bit of a breeze going into it. The oil goes very loose, and although, oil is not a thick thing anyway, when it's actually hot, it goes super fluid. So it's very, very, very cool to look at it. It's starting to do it now. I wish you guys could see it, but it suddenly pulled back in the oil. I think you guys saw that. I had rolled it around, and you see how it has that little bit of a ripple to it? That's what you're looking for, is those little ripple textures that you get off of the side. You do see it. Hey there, LD, how are you doing? Welcome in. Tonight I am going to recap it quickly, my spiced pumpkin cider, which is already in the crock pot working. And that is, I used 1/2 gallon of apple cider, I used 1/2 cup of pumpkin puree, a 1/2 teaspoon of ginger, a 1/4 teaspoon of cloves, and a full teaspoon of cinnamon, and whisked that up and put it in my crock pot on high heat for an hour. And then I took I am making beef chow yuck, and I took 2 pounds of chuck steak, uh, 2 pounds of chuck steak, cut it up into long slices, and it is now marinating in sesame oil, a little bit of ground, a little, it's right there, honey. You pick up that thing. It's right there, isn't it? Sorry, my phone is just going off. Okay, back to what I was saying. 2 pounds of this. It's in sesame seed oil. It is in canola oil, a little bit of low sodium soy sauce, and a little bit of cornstarch, which will, that's what the meat is marinating in, and it will make the meat more tender. Now, this has come up to heat, and I'm going to start. See the sizzle. You are going to be able to start seeing the stir frying, which I will be doing. Oh, didn't see that. Throw that away. This is bok choy and celery, and that is the first portions I'm putting in. It's beef chow yuck. It's a stir-fried dish, like chicken chow mein, but made with beef. And it's got bok choy and celery and sweet onion. It has lots of vegetables in here. It's got 2 cans of bean sprouts, 2 cans of baby corn, 2 cans of sliced water chestnuts, 2 cans of bamboo shoots. And this is 2 big bunches of bok choy being put in my electric wok, because I needed to have something that wasn't oven bound. Basically, being disabled, I have trouble cooking in the kitchen, and we have adapted to that with a cooking table in the living room, and this is what I cook on. So that's just a couple tablespoons of canola oil down there. You wouldn't want to use sesame oil for this, because sesame oil is very strong. It can very easily take over a dish. You don't want to use sesame oil as your major oil component. You want to be very careful with that. Separating out more onions as I can find them, since I have about a 9-quart metal bowl here that's full of the veg, and I do mean full, all the way to the top. We just blew a circuit. I don't know. Okay. Yeah, thank God we have that. Pretty much the hardest thing about stir frying is constantly stirring. You need to make sure, because it's cooked on very high heat, that you do keep rotating the food in the container. Sorry, I just hit my microphone with my shoulder and turned it off, but I think you guys have been hearing me. Well, you see, LD, we used to have, before we bought our own router and before we bought our own, all the other equipment that we need for our cable setup, we used to rent it from the cable company, and their equipment sucked. And we could count on every day having an hour or so of outage, and often 2 or 3 or 4 hours of outage for no apparent reason. Just, oh well, it's out, mysterious reason, it'll, try rebooting. We tried all that, and oddly enough, our experience improved after we bought all of our own equipment. Yeah, they have a tendency to monopolize their areas. Well, if you have trouble with your equipment, LD, consider buying the equipment instead of using theirs, because theirs really is bad. So while I'm cooking this, it's basically just being cooked down a little bit. I still want to have the vegetables have some backbone. You don't want to cook this down until they're mushy. Some of the best things about stir fry is that you are cooking, there it goes again. Take the crock pot out. It's the only thing that's different, so. Okay. All right, so as you can see, the leaves of the bok choy are soft now. The onions are starting to go slightly translucent, so is the stem of the bok choy. Yeah, you can have vegetables that are too crunchy. This is a tender crunch. It's not too raw, and it's still got quite a bit that it's got to cook. So I am going to, at this point, add it back in with its canned vegetables that are in here. I'm not sure why we're having trouble with our circuit. Exactly, al dente. Alrighty then. Even just onions and bok choy sauteed together smell wonderful. But then again, I also know what's coming, so that's going to definitely be good. What I am going to be doing next is taking the meat, the chuck steak that has marinated, and I'm going to put it in the wok with a little bit of extra oil. And I'm going to saute that with some oyster sauce on it. And then we will be adding the vegetables back in and some beef broth. And then we will be thickening the sauce. So we're almost there. Okay, let's take a little bit of extra oil. That's about a tablespoon. And I need to now open up the oyster sauce. Which is one of the few sauces that I actually trust not to kill me because it has no garlic in it. And I add a few tablespoons to this. And then I stir it around a little bit in the oil so that it starts to cook. This also works really lovely if you're going to be frying tofu. I like the oil and this, and then you just fry the tofu in it. Oh, it makes it taste just lovely. All right, so now we've got our beef that has been marinating for an hour, and it is going in there to cook up. And we've got that off to the side now. And this is 2 pounds of chuck steak. You can use whatever you like. Anything from stew meat up. And it'll perform magnificently. So it's just a matter of what texture you like in your meat. Oh, I wish you guys had smell-o-vision. This smells so good. Oh, we won't catch on fire, Frumpy. We may freeze to death because they've knocked our power out, but other than that, we won't cause a fire. They've made some very interesting power choices. I'd have to take a look at their actual electrical room to see what's going on, but I'm pretty sure they won't let me do that, so it's going to remain a mystery. There's also the fact that a lot of times our power flickers because we are right at the base of the Cascade Mountain chain, and we're having rain storms there, and the wind can knock out power without us even knowing it's storming, really. Banana. Pretty sure she doesn't mean minion like that, honey. Although it would be interesting if she did. Now, as I mentioned before, this can be as carb friendly as you want it to be. You can serve this with soft noodles. You can serve it with the crispy noodles from a can. You can serve it with rice or just eat it as it is. This is pretty much my favorite way to do it. It's just such a tasty dish when this is done. The vegetables being crisp tender, the meat nice and savory. It's got some browning on it from the wok, and the light gravy that's formed on this from the beef broth and oyster sauce and a little bit of soy. It's just such a nice, fresh tasting dish. Basically, coming up between now and the end of the year, I will be trying to do one recipe that is some sort of side dish or accompaniment that would fit into a festive meal or gathering, and another recipe that's more easy to put together so that you have a better time dealing with the holiday, whether that be going out and doing your shopping or dealing with people coming over, family coming into town, sudden influx of children as they are given holidays. Whatever it is that upsets your household, I'm going to be trying to make that a little easier with giving you meals that are relatively easy to put together, serve a lot, and freeze beautifully. And despite the fact that this is a stir fry, this also freezes beautifully. Just put it in a single serving size container, throw it in the freezer, and when you want to get some out, it's about 6-7 minutes in the microwave on high, and you've got another lovely dish there that you can just snarfle down or take in with you to work. When Andrew and I worked at Intel, we cooked about 3 times a week. The rest of the time, we ate TV dinners made out of what we cooked those days that we did cook. And we always brought our lunches, well, almost always brought our lunches. And people would always be asking us what we had as we brought in almond fried chicken on fried rice, and beef chow yuck and chicken chow mein, and we would bring in beef sauteed with mushrooms in a Parmesan cream sauce and rice, and any one of a dozen dishes that would become our staples. And we would just have the best food for lunches, and there was always somebody following us back to our desk asking us what was that. So the recipes that I have cooked here tonight and other nights, other days, can be found in my Discord, and there's the link to the Discord there, and it is under Stream Recipes. Now, this is done, and it has such a lovely fragrance to it. Like I said, the oyster sauce gives it that extra element that they call umami, and it is just, it's not identifiable, it's just a richness to your food that you wouldn't have otherwise. Now I am adding in all of the veg here, trying to make it fit. The bowl I am emptying out of is 9 quarts, and I am putting it into a 7-quart dish, which is a bit of a challenge, but I'm up to it. And at this point you go back to stirring, and that's just like you would incorporate any kind of food into a large, if you're going to be incorporating egg whites into a dish, you stir carefully from the sides, lifting up from underneath. This is the same way. You're just trying to go for incorporating what's there, heating it all up. And as another running recap, this is 2 pounds of beef chuck steak. We have got celery, sweet onion, bok choy, baby corn. We have bean sprouts and bamboo shoots and water chestnuts. And this is all being combined with that sauce that was created by the beef. And I will be adding a little bit of beef broth to this too, so that it has more than enough to coat everything in the gravy once it's formed. Okay, now alright, in my 4-cup measuring cup, I am putting together cornstarch and beef broth and a little bit more of the oyster sauce. So and I am adding 2 cups of beef broth to this. And about 2 tablespoons of cornstarch. This doesn't need to get really, really thick. The whole point of this is just to make a light gravy. And then I will whisk it together with a fork until the cornstarch combines which it now has done. And I will pour this, kind of looks like milk, over the top of the meal here. And that has more than filled it up. And now I just go into continuing to stir this, because what you are doing now is cooking the cornstarch. And the cornstarch will turn it into a gravy. And it makes that lovely light tasting gravy. Think of it as a sauce. A gravy is a sauce. And you just keep mixing to combine things, and so that the cornstarch doesn't find places to hide out where it's not cooked. And it really only takes a few minutes at this point. I think you can hear it making little swooshing noises because it is frying underneath there. And the sauce is starting to thicken. And this has remained on about 3/4 temperature here the whole time. So it's all been cooked under a very high heat. I do apologize that it is missing ingredients. It doesn't have the shiitake mushrooms in it. It should, because they didn't look good, and I couldn't find any snow peas, which I absolutely love and are definitely part of this ingredient list, but unfortunately they sold out, and sugar snap peas are just not a substitute in my mind. So, and as you can see, the gravy is starting to thicken. It is becoming more of a solid bit. It isn't just broth anymore. It's kind of a nice glaze that's forming on the meat and vegetables. And despite the fact that I tried to make this a half list of ingredients, I don't think I succeeded very well. I just used more vegetables. So, as usual, I filled up whatever container it is I'm cooking in, despite my best efforts not to. It's a good thing this does freeze well. So, it is very good. I wish you guys could all smell this. It is easy to do. This is a very easy recipe. It's just a matter of frying and stirring and chopping. There's a lot of chopping to this, but not really anything complicated. Like most stir fries, you're just frying at high temperature and stirring constantly so that nothing burns. So we are very nearly done here. I need to taste it and see if the cornstarch is actually cooked. It'll have a floury flavor if it doesn't. So that's where your testing point is. Now this will be very hot, so be careful. Needs another minute or two. This is one of those things that it will literally change in just a couple minutes, from being not done to being completely done and needing to be turned off. As you can see, this is a nice colorful looking dish. If you wanted to add some extra color to it afterwards, you could serve it with some sliced green onion, but honestly it really doesn't need it. Garnishing for the sake of garnishing, not really my thing. I'm happy that it tastes good. So yeah, and the cornstarch gravy is turning clear now, and it is also covering everything in a lovely light sauce. And I am going to call this one done. So I am turning the heat off, and I will begin plating. So honey, if you would, can you follow the crock pot with the cup and bring me back a cup to show everybody? So just stir it through with that. And now thank you. I'm sorry, can you hear me now? This is my plate of beef chow yuck. My husband is going to taste for you all and tell you how wonderful it is. I should actually pull him into the room with me. I'm not sure how to do that actually though. Okay, he doesn't want to. All right. Anyway, I've also got, ouch, my cup of the pumpkin spice cider. I'm going to have a taste of that. Oh, that's just lovely. You can still taste the apple cider in it, but it's got pumpkin in it as well, and the warming seasonings of cloves and ginger and cinnamon, and it's just a beautifully warming, not incredibly sweet liquid here, and as you can see, it's not very thick either. What do you think, sweetheart?
It's very crunchy when the meat's well done.
It says the meat's well done and tender. The vegetables are al dente crunchy. The sauce that you can see on it is savory and light, and this is from start to finish about an hour and a half for the two recipes, and honestly the majority of it was prepping the vegetables. So I am going to say, please give this recipe a try. You'll find it on my Discord under Stream Recipes, and both of these recipes are just easy to put together and so lovely to taste. I want to thank you all for coming tonight, and thank you for chatting, and I hope you enjoy the recipes that we've tried. Thank you everyone for coming, and let's see if we can find somebody to raid. Frumpy, do you have... Oh, Frumpy's mom, hi! Oh, that's okay. You go back and watch it. Watch the VOD. I hope you'll enjoy it. Gonna try to find somebody to raid. Let's take a look. Um, oh no, she wasn't. That's too bad. Uh, well, I'm not really sure at this point who to raid. Honey, just pick a food and drink person. I'm not... Okay, I don't know if they can see me if I do this, but let's go into here to Twitch. The only deaf guy we've got. We're gonna go to a date night in.
You work at home?
So it is a date night in.
Click where the time.
Okay. So thank you all for coming, and I hope you go on the raid. And we'll see you on Saturday again. I will announce what it is that I'm making at that time. Thanks again for coming. Bye-bye.
Yep, that raided.
Okay.